Thank you. Good morning. I'm sure everybody says this when they come here, but you all are such beautiful singers. Does everybody say that? Yeah, well, it's true, is why they say it. I am not a musical person per se, and by per se I mean not at all, but I'm married into a very musical family. They like to sing in 6 parts on road trips and at holidays and stuff, so they would have been totally down with this right now. They are beautiful singers, and I just mouth the words so that they don't hear how terrible a singer I am. There are several things that I want to talk with you about. Every time I come to a college campus, you can say you want to talk about anything in the world, but what people really want to talk about, obviously, is relationships. They can say they want to hear about anything else, but really that's what they want to talk about, which is totally fine. And so in a minute, I want to share with you what I think is the secret and the heart of all relationships. But first, I just want to tell you a few things that I cannot let go unsaid being on a college campus. The first one is, it is deeply ironic that I have been invited to speak in a college chapel. The first time that I was invited to speak at a college chapel, one of my college friends says, were you familiar with the chapel program at our college? I was not, really. I was not the kind of kid who went to chapel. I was not the kind of kid who had like a bright, lovely, rainbows and butterflies college experience. And so if some of you are having like a totally phenomenal experience, you feel like deeply confident and totally yourself and loved and known in the amazing college world of things, then good, awesome. If some of you, like me, feel kind of lost and kind of like you don't know who you're gonna be yet, but you know you're not who you used to be, and you don't totally know where you fit, and you feel like every day you wake up and maybe you're a different person, and you've got more questions than answers, and the answers that used to work don't work anymore. If you feel like that, all I want to say is you're not alone and you're on a really good journey. Some of us don't have it all together by college. Some of us don't by the time we're 25 or 30 or 35 or ever, and that's one of the things they don't tell you. I think they tell you that by the time you get here, you're supposed to know a lot of things. And I would say if you're in the middle of the not knowing, cool. You're in a really, really good place. And what I found was that asking questions honestly and letting things go unanswered and living in that space between and praying prayers that sounded a lot like, I don't know. Dear Jesus, I still don't know. Dear Jesus, I'm still not sure. Those are really good, really beautiful prayers to pray. So again, if some of you are in like a, kind of magical college experience, awesome. Don't tell me about it because I didn't have one of those. But if you're not and you feel like a little bit out of sync with what you feel like should be happening inside of you, I think you're in good company and I think you're on the right journey. The other thing that I always say, always, when I'm on a college campus, is this one sentence. Whoever you are, male or female, freshman or senior, single or dating or engaged or married, you are significant with or without a significant other. You are significant with or without a significant other. I went to a Christian college, much like this one, and I remember the feeling that you counted a little bit more if you were part of a couple. I remember the pressure to find your person. I remember the feeling that you might be a grown-up if you've already found your person. And if by the time you graduate you haven't found that person, there might be something wrong with you. And I just want to remind you, you are significant with or without a significant other, and everybody's story unfolds differently, and everybody's timeline unfolds differently. Some of you will find the person that God intended for you to spend your life with here. Amazing. That's a totally valid, legit part of your journey. But it's not everybody's journey. And frankly, thank God I didn't marry anybody I dated in college. Literally. God has a different story for each one of us, and that story has a different timeline for each one of us. And there's this weird narrative that romance and being chosen and being loved is the most important thing, but it's not the most important thing. learning who you are, learning who you're not, learning who God is, moving into your future, developing your gifts, building your brain, building your friendships. This is what you're here to do, and don't ever let someone make you think you're less than because you're not part of a couple. It's just totally a lie. And I would also say, so again, I did not marry any of the assorted and suspect people that I dated in college, but I sure spent a lot of time and energy thinking about them and being with them. And when I look back, I wish that I had spent a lot of that time with the men and women who have become friends along the journey for my life, not like that one guy that I dated for that one semester. This place has the potential to yield for you some of the most shaping and significant relationships of your life. I'm talking about friendship. My very best friend in all the world, I met freshman year, first semester freshman year, we lived in the same dorm. We are almost 20 years from that day, and she is still my very best friend in the universe. When things go wrong, she's the one I call. We had babies 5 months apart. We lived 2 blocks away. We walked that 2 blocks every day, I think. Another dear friend from college, when I decided to run a marathon as a total, complete non-athlete. She is a marathon runner, and she flew from San Francisco to Chicago to run every single step with me. The people that I invested in from a friendship standpoint during this season, the season that you're in now, have been the people who have walked me through the highest and lowest moments of my life since then. And so when I would say, if I could give you a piece of just massively unsolicited advice, worry less about who you're dating and invest so much more in your friends, because they're the ones that are going to be there 20 years later. They're the ones that are going to shape your life. The guys that you dated, the girls that you dated, all you're going to do is see them at weddings, and it's going to be so awkward. I have done this. I can tell you this. Oh, so awkward. But the people that you choose to walk with, to love, to tell your story to listen to their story, to carry them when things fall apart, these friendships might be the people that God uses to challenge you and shape you and guide you for the whole rest of your life. The friendships you're making right now are really, really worth your time. Okay, so those are the things I just have to say at every college. And now what I want to talk about is what I think is the heart of relationship, the true secret to relationships. If there was one skill that I would advise you learn in this season of your life that you will take with you in every relationship you have from now to the end of your life, it's this. I want you to be people who learn the practice of forgiveness. Forgiveness is an inherent part of relationships. God built the system so that relationships run on forgiveness. And anybody who's married knows this to be true. If you can't forgive, you can't stay married. If you can't forgive, you can't maintain a best friendship for 20 years. If you can't forgive, you can't walk deeply with a group of people building a church or building a life or building an organization. Forgiveness is right at the center of what it means to be in relationship. But a lot of us think that the best relationships are one where forgiveness never needs to happen. We think sometimes when something goes wrong in a friendship, when something goes wrong in a friendship, when something goes wrong in a family, when something goes wrong in a dating relationship, then it's over. When something goes wrong in a friendship, it doesn't mean your friendship is over. When something goes wrong in your friendship, it means your friendship is normal. Conflict is an inevitable part of relationship, and the better you can get now at letting conflict turn quickly to forgiveness, the more satisfying and healthy your relationships will be long term. And this is the other kind of weird thing about forgiveness. You learn it because you want to have right relationships. You want to maintain your friendships. You want to stay in your meaningful relationships. But forgiveness is not just about the other person, is it? If you can't forgive, you will never be free. Your heart will never be free. You think when someone wrongs you, you put them up on this hook. You're up there and I want you to dangle and I want you to be uncomfortable because you wronged me and I'm right. And I get to judge and I get to condemn and I get to walk around with anger and hatred and accusation and judgment. And then pretty soon you realize there are 2 people up on that hook. The person who wronged you and you, the person that has now become overrun by resentment and bitterness and anger. We forgive because it helps us live in right relationships, but we also forgive because we want to be free in our hearts. My husband I consider him my personal IT department. We both are like kind of freelancy people who work from home, and so anytime I can't work anything on my computer, I'm like, hey, which is all the time. I can't ever work anything on my computer. I can barely email. And one of our constant problems, number one, the only thing I know how to do is turn on and turn off, or turn off and then turn on. That's my only trick. But when he comes and looks at my computer, I'm always like, something's broken. It's terrible. It's a virus. It's going to blow. I don't know, He's like, settle down. And what he says every time is, Shauna, you're running like 95 applications right now. How do you expect anything to work? And I don't know what that means. And I'm like, just make it stop, But then he explains to me that when you've got all these different applications open, even though you don't think you're using them, even though they're of no value to you, the work you're trying to do is compromised because of all the things going on in that little world behind the screen that I don't understand. And that's how it is with our hearts. When you live with resentment and unforgiveness, when you choose to live with bitterness, when you choose to let broken relationships be the rule in your life, your heart is occupied running on resentment, running on bitterness, running on judgment, running on condemnation. And it doesn't let you live with love, with grace, with freedom. Your heart becomes compromised. It started off as what that person did to you, and it becomes what you're doing to your own heart. And so the one question I want to ask you today, and we're going to look at a section of Scripture, who has wronged you? What would it look like to offer forgiveness? And how badly do you want to be free? Because that's what it's about. It's not about that other person. How badly do you want to be free? You're at an age now where you can start probably to understand some of the things that happened in your childhood or with your parents that were less than ideal, things you wish they wouldn't have done, things that hurt you, ways they've wronged you. I'm a parent now, so I know how hard it is to, and you inevitably wrong your kids. And I remember being in college and having hard conversations with my parents saying, listen, I love you. I know you meant to do this in a loving way, but it hurt me in this way. I want to talk about it, and then I want to make it right between us, because that's what family does. I know that some of my best moments in college were when things went off the tracks with a friend, and instead of just running away and then being someone that you run into awkwardly on campus, sitting down and saying, there is something between us that I don't want to move into our future. It has come between us, and it can go behind us. So who has wronged you? What would it look like to forgive? Because at the end of it, how badly do you want to be free? So there's a section of Scripture that I love, and this is the Message version. It's Matthew 18, 21 to 35. At that point, Peter got up the nerve to ask, Master, how many times do I forgive a brother or sister who hurts me? 7? Jesus replied, hardly. Try 70 times 7. The kingdom of God is like a king who decided to square accounts with his servant. As he got underway, one servant was brought up before him who had run up a debt of $100,000. He couldn't pay up, so the king ordered the man, along with his wife, children, and goods, to be auctioned off at the slave market. The poor wretch threw himself at the king's feet and begged, give me a chance and I'll pay it back. Touched by his plea, the king let him off, erasing the debt. The servant was no sooner out of the room when he came upon one of his fellow servants who owed him $10. He seized him by the throat and demanded, pay up now. The poor wretch threw himself down and begged, give me a chance and I'll pay it all back, but he wouldn't do it. He had him arrested and put in jail until the debt was paid. When the other servants saw this going on, they were outraged and brought a detailed report to the king. The king summoned the man and said, you evil servant, I forgave your entire debt when you begged me for mercy. Shouldn't you be compelled to be merciful to your fellow servant who asked for mercy? The king was furious and put the screws to the man until he paid back his entire debt. And that's exactly what my Father in heaven is going to do to each one of you who doesn't forgive unconditionally anyone who asks for mercy. And the key section of that passage that's so beautiful, I think, and so important for us. Shouldn't you be compelled to be merciful to your fellow servant who asked for mercy? This is the deal. At the heart of Christianity is forgiveness. If you are a Christian, what that means is that you accept forgiveness from a perfect, holy God. And so it follows that we who have been forgiven have to be forgivers. It's how it works. It's how the system was built. And so what Jesus is saying is, if you have been forgiven, the nature of it is you have to be a forgiver. Not because you feel like it, not because it's easy, because it's how the system works. God can't do his unconditional forgiving work in you if you're the kind of person who says you won't do it in other people. You will stand in the way of God's forgiving work in your own life and soul and story if you decide to be a person who doesn't do the forgiving work in your relationships. So we forgive because we want to be free. And we forgive because we've been forgiven. One of my favorite quotes, Lou Smedes wrote a great book. I like all of his books, but he has a book called Forgive and Forget that I really love, and it says, forgiveness is God's invention for coming to terms with a world in which, despite their best intentions, people are unfair to each other and hurt each other deeply. He began by forgiving us, and he invites us all to forgive each other. God is not surprised that relationships go bad. He built forgiveness into the system of relationship so that we could become as used to doing it as we are breathing. You cannot be in a long-term healthy friendship or relationship without becoming an expert forgiver. So if there's one thing I would love to call you to today, when I think about your future, when I think about the significant relationships that you're a part of now, when I think about you moving into long-term dating relationships or marriages, when I think about you becoming parents, when I think about you starting businesses and working in partnership with people that you love, if you can get the hang of being a forgiver, not being a pushover, not being walked on, not being taken advantage of, but being a person who says, I understand that relationships run on forgiveness. And I understand that I want to be free. I want my whole heart to be available to God's purposes in my life. I don't want to be able to offer the world just one tiny little corner of my heart because the rest is totally occupied with bitterness and resentment and rage. So who has wronged you? What would it look like to extend forgiveness? And how badly do you want to be free? One of my very, very best friends had been married probably a decade. They had 2 kids, and he did something wrong. Wrong. And in her hurt, and in her anger, and in her fear, she did something wrong. And they had decided they were done. And right at the last minute, he said, let's take a drive. One of their things together, even while they had been dating, before they had kids, before they were married, they used to go on long drives together. They live in the Bay Area. It's a really beautiful part of the country with bridges and mountains. And so their thing was taking drives. And she's like, I don't want to go. And he said, please, take a drive with me. So they put the kids to bed, and they got a sitter, and they got in his truck that they'd been in 1,000,000 times over the years. And they drove over the bridges and across the bay, and they drove by their kids' school, and they drove by places they'd been on dates, and they drove by their church. They drove by parks where they had gone on picnics. They drove and drove and drove in total silence. And then my friend, my dear friend, she told me later, she said, I held out my hand across the little armrest, and I knew that if I offered him my hand, I was not saying what he did was all right, but I was saying we will create a new future together because I can't live with this much resentment and rage in my life. I don't know how it will work, but we will make a new future together. We won't live in the past because I can't, because my heart can't take it. But we will create a new future together. And so she held out her hand, and he took her hand. And they have created together a new future because they both believe in being the kinds of people for whom forgiveness is the rule. Because they both believe that when brokenness happens in a relationship, it doesn't mean it's over, it means it's normal. Because they both want to be free. So I'm going to pray for us in a minute. Before I do, I'm going to give you just a minute of silence and space. And I just want you to think about your relationships. Here, with your friends here, with your friends from home, the people you work with your parents, with your siblings, with your extended family. Where is there broken relationship in your life? What would it look like to take one step? And I want to be really clear, there are some grievances in friendships that can absolutely be solved over coffee, and there are some that take a long time. I have a friend who's a counselor, which is like a super awesome friend to have. You always want to have a friend who's a counselor, because you can ask them all your questions like for free. The other thing you want down the road is you want a friend who's a pediatrician, because then whenever your kid's running around, you're like, hey, look at his rash. Is that cool? Do you feel good about that? So also a friend who cuts hair, super nice to have. So if you can get a friend who's a counselor, a friend who cuts hair, and a pediatrician, you're like set. So I have a friend who's a counselor, and I was asking him about it, and he said, number one, if people knew how to forgive, I'd be out of a job. When I talk to people, a very small portion of people that come to him are talking about mental illness. A very small portion of people are talking about various issues. What people are talking about, by and large, the reason he is busy every day, all day, is because we as a community, as a culture, have not learned the practice of forgiveness. What he said, so I was asking about it, he said, number one, when we're talking about something really difficult, a very significant wrong, specifically something maybe in your childhood with your family, something that damaged you in a significant way, counseling is a really helpful thing. He says he thinks about it like physical therapy. Like you show up to that person, and that person has the expertise and the skill to teach you the new motions after an injury. Do you know what I mean? So think about it like physical therapy for the new heart that you're building. So for a lot of us, counseling is going to be a really, really key part of that. But the other thing to keep in mind, how do we forgive? We forgive over and over with help. Over and over. If you expect for something that has been breaking and occupying your heart for years to be gone overnight, it won't happen. You're going to wake up every day, and you're going to start again, and you're going to start again, and you're going to start again, and it's getting easier and easier over time. So you're going to do it over and over, and you're going to do it with help, with God's help through prayer, with the help of your community, through friendship and storytelling and encouragement, maybe with a counselor's help. But how do we forgive? We forgive with help over and over. Because these are the questions. Who has wronged you? What would it look like to be a forgiver? Because how badly do you want to be free?